Welcome into another edition of Locked On Now NBA Insider Report. I'm your host, Kainani Stevens, joined by Antonio Daniels, our Locked On Insider and Sirius XM host. Antonio, it feels like the 76ers have packed a season's worth of drama into like a couple of
Right.
weeks right now. And the most latest bombshell is that Joel Embiid has reportedly tested positive for COVID-19. So what does that mean immediately for this team? And what are you thinking about this right now?
Well, immediately for the team, they have a great backup. That's your first thought. So we think about the basketball piece of this first. The basketball piece is they have a great backup in Andre Drummond. A year ago was Dwight Howard. Now it's Andre Drummond, who is a career 14-point, 14 rebound guy. So if you have to be without Joel Embiid for 2 weeks, you have a guy in Andre Drummond that's accustomed to being a starting center, an all-star center in the NBA. So from that, there's no like immediate panic. But from the other side, I think sometimes we forget because sports are back and they're up and going, because college football is back and it's up and going, because the NBA last year ended up finishing outside the bubble. We forget that we're in a global pandemic.
Right.
We forget that. So when you are in the middle of a global pandemic, these things happen. If you go throughout the NBA and you look at the amount of players that are sidelined right now, just look at the Philadelphia 76ers in general, because Joel Embiid will be the fourth guy. Isaiah Joe is out. Matisse Thybulle's out. Tobias Harris is out. And now you add Joel Embiid to that equation, and you can go throughout the league, different stars. Chris Middleton was out in Milwaukee. You're in the middle of a global pandemic. So this is something that right now is the Philadelphia 76ers. Last year is the Washington Wizards. It hit them big time. This is something that hopefully teams won't have to deal with, but it's a part of the season and playing in the middle of a global pandemic.
As you mentioned, Tobias Harris is dealing with this, Matisse Thybulle. There's a lot of different players on this team that this is going to affect. Is it almost kind of treating it a little bit like injuries at this point? Because, it's so common, even with vaccinations, this is something that teams have to deal with.
Yeah, well, you understand throughout the course of a season, it's no longer seen as a badge of honor to play 82 games. So you're not really expecting guys to play 82 games anymore. But here's the thing with the difference from injury is you don't know how guys are going to respond to COVID. It impacts everybody different. When you have a sprained ankle, a sprained knee, or whatever it may be, you go through your treatment, your physical therapy, and you work yourself back up to being able to go out there and contribute. But this is different. When you're talking about COVID-19 and how it impacts everyone's body, it impacts everybody's body different. There are some people that don't really feel the effects of it. There are some people that it hits hard, but how it really impacts everybody different is how they respond to it once they're over it. Mm-hmm. Can you get your win back quicker? How quickly can you get back on the floor to get back to that point where you were prior to COVID-19? So I think that's the part that'll be interesting to watch.
We talked a little bit about on the court. Obviously, Andre Drummond's a vet. He can handle that, get a double-double in there. But what does Embiid do for the team? He's kind of the life force, like he's his energy, right? That's what's going to be missed, I'm assuming, especially with
everything
dealing with some stuff with Ben Simmons. So how do you replace something like that, like your fire starter?
You don't. And I will be lying to you if I told you do. It's amazing. You're talking about a guy who last year was in the MVP conversation, and if he was more available, probably would have walked away with the MVP award last year. No discredit to Nikola Jokic. But with all that being said, when you're missing a piece of there is no more professional league. So I don't care if you talk about the NFL, the NHL, Major League Baseball, there is no more league that is as star-driven as the NBA is. What I mean by that is one player makes a huge difference. Mm-hmm. One player makes a significant difference. And when you're talking about Joel Embiid, it's not only the guy that leads the Philadelphia 76ers in points and rebounds, it's who everything is geared toward. Your offensive schemes, your defensive schemes are geared around highlighting him on one end and allowing him to roam and do what he does on the other end. You don't just replace that like that. No, he's too good. He's too talented. He's too skilled. But what you want to do is keep yourself above water. And what I mean is if you look at their next 9 games, they are not easy. Right. They are not easy. You have the Knicks today. Mm-hmm. You have Milwaukee tomorrow. You got Toronto on Thursday. And then they go on a 6-game road trip And one of those teams in that 6-game road trip is 500 or below, and that's at Indiana. Those games are at Golden State, at Portland. At Utah. It is a gauntlet that they have to go through. And without Joel Embiid, that is not going to be an easy thing to do.
Those West Coast swings are tough no matter what. It's certainly without your all-star center, it's going to be it would be really nice right now to have Ben Simmons back on this team with his mind right, playing healthy. Is there any hope of this? Has the ship sailed, or what are we doing at this point? I
don't feel comfortable saying the ship has sailed. I don't know, but do I see Ben Simmons playing in a Philadelphia 76ers uniform? I don't.
Right.
I don't have any inside information on that, but the last thing I remember Ben Simmons saying is that he never wanted to play for the Philadelphia 76ers again, and that hasn't changed.
Right.
You look at everything that's transpired between him and Doc Rivers or him and Daryl Morey, everything that's transpired. What has changed? He's reported. He's gone through a couple of practices, but there has been nothing to indicate to us that he plans on getting back on the floor with the Philadelphia 76ers. And you're right. It would make a huge difference to have someone like Ben Simmons, the most versatile defender in the league, a guy that pushes the pace, that makes everybody around him better. But right now, because of what's transpired, that just does not seem very likely.
And I feel like at this point almost too, I know we talk about this a lot, but just the words that have been said, like, he's saying he never wanted to play in Philly. And it's almost at a point where you're like, have you just hurt each other too much to like get anything done at this point? So obviously if this doesn't get it done, it's never going to get done. Right.
Right. It's almost like a stare down. Okay. It's a stare down between Ben Simmons camp and Daryl Morey camp. Who's going to blink first? And I said this before, I just don't think in this situation, anybody's winning. No. So you can call it a pride contest, whatever it may be, but no one's winning here. It's great that Philly is off to an 8-2 start without Ben Simmons, because what you look at is who this team was a year ago with Ben Simmons. I know everybody wants to point to Game 7 against the Atlanta Hawks. I get it. That makes sense. But you can't forget, this is also the team during the regular season that had the best record in the Eastern Conference. Right. So you're in the championship fast lane. So now you remove Ben Simmons from that equation. And again, we are talking about a small sample size where they're 8-2. But you remove Ben Simmons from the equation and you're not in the championship fast lane like you were a year ago. So the 76ers aren't winning. The Embiid's not winning. You want to take advantage of his talent right now for this championship window while you have it. The fans aren't winning. Again, I'll say they're winning right now because they're 8-2. But we all know this is a long season. It is not a sprint. It's a marathon. Things change quickly. And Daryl Morey's not winning on the other side either. So until someone blinks and a move is made, whether Ben Simmons decides to come back and play or Daryl Morey makes a move and enough to get something in return to put the Philadelphia 76ers back in the championship fast lane, I don't know where it goes from here.
It's getting stranger and stranger times in Philly. Obviously going to be a tough 10 days or so because Embiid will be out at least that long until he can clear protocols. And as you mentioned, a tough road trip. So we'll have to keep an eye on that as well. So wrap for our Insider Report. Antonio Daniels, our Locked On NBA Insider, Sirius XM host. Thank you for joining me. I'm Kainani Stevens, Locked On Local Sports every day.